Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 4 of the 939 Corse AROC Touring Car Championship for the second half of 2023. This evening we are here at a bit of an old favourite of mine actually, Brands Hatch, that historic circuit on the UK calendar, big in the touring car and GT scenes of course. Here though in our Giulietta WTCR cars for this evening's running, just under 10 minutes to go in qualifying, and the drivers have been bombing along rather nicely, it must be said, in this qualifying session. We've got 9 cars on the grid, and as we can see, setting some good times as well, with Matt Daly leading the charge. It's a 1:30.226 for Matt Daly in this session. He leads and is on provisional pole at the moment. Will Inglis not too far behind with a 1:30.4. And then we see Alan Matthews following closely behind. Actually a bit of a battle forming up already this early on in the weekend between Jack Hodson and Alan Matthews. It's I was about to say a bit of a battle forming up, but completely read the lap time wrong there, so apologies. That's 1:31.5 for Jack Hodson and a 1:30.5 for Alan Matthews. So Will Inglis, his nearest rival at this point in time. Matt Daly, though, is trying to make sure that he can build that gap up a little bit more. Is still setting some very fast laps indeed. Goes purple actually on that middle sector on his previous attempt. Loses out though through the first and third sectors, so doesn't improve. Still a 1:30.3. That would still have him on provisional pole, even if he hadn't set that impressive 30.2 earlier on. Looking elsewhere down the grid, then it has Andrew Brammer in a 1:30.7 at this point in time. Barry Clayton a 1:31.9. Then we have Rob Whitney on the super soft compound of tyre. Now this is a bit of an odd call here. I could be entirely wrong, but since the last time I drove the WTCR, I was very kindly informed that the super soft tyre not actually the ideal. Not even race tyre, not the ideal qualifying tyre. It's the soft or the slick compound tyre which provides you with a higher level of grip, a much quicker tyre overall. So we'll see with 7 minutes to go if Rob Whitney is going to change up his qualifying strategy a little bit later on, see if he can find some time now, or whether he feels most comfortable on the super soft tyre. Of course, he feels most comfortable on this compound of tyre. Why not run on it, and why not try and get the fastest laps possible? Actually, funny enough, Rob Whitney was in my hometown, Liverpool, not too long ago for the Labour Party conference. We didn't unfortunately get the chance to catch up, but he trekked up here. I believe it is. I suspect it is Giulietta. Why wouldn't you bring that lovely car of yours up here to Liverpool? But yes, is back in the sim now for much more important matters, obviously, here for the AROC Racing Leagues. Back on board then with Matt Daly as he crosses the line now at 1:30.2. Sees him go fastest in this session. Still hasn't improved on that previous lap. In fact, that previous lap, a 1:41.3, so I suspect that was an outlap, and this might be another quick attempt from Matt Daly here. As we can see, Alan Matthews improving there then on that previous lap. 1:30.345 sees him go second fastest. Now bringing the charge to Will Inglis late on in this session. What will Will Inglis be able to do in terms of a response? I can tell you he did improve on that previous lap. It was a 1:30.423, so a very slight improvement on his previous best, but not quite there with Alan Matthews just yet. We'll see. He loses time, actually. Loses a lot of time on the first sector here, so I suspect we missed something at the start of the lap here, and we'll wait for another fast lap attempt here from Will Inglis. So 4 minutes to go in this session, and it's Barry Clayton currently one of the faster cars out on track at this point in time. Let's have a look then at what he can do on this lap to try and push towards those in the top 3. The quickest driver in the 131s is Barry Clayton. We're currently now heading back down onto the Stirling Straight. Apologies, that's Clearways. You'd think I'd remember that, given how many times I commentated here. But it's currently looking for a fairly decent lap here from Barry Clayton. As we can see in the bottom left-hand corner, predicted 130.8, maybe 130.9 as he crosses the line, and it will be a 130.9, so now half a second off Will Inglis, but arguably more importantly for his race weekend, a clear ways ahead, if you'll pardon the pun, of Jack Hudson. Matt Daly then still leading at this point in time, 130.226, about a tenth clear of Alan Matthews and Will Inglis. And we are 8 laps in with Matt Daly. He's posted 8 laps so far in this session. We have Alan Matthews actually with 12 laps to his name. They've really been going for it in this qualifying so far, as we have a bit of an outlap here for Matt Daly, as he will start another fast attempt in just a moment's time. Not too far behind him, of course, is Alan Matthews there. The back end stepping out as we head through the Paddock Hill bend there. That is a fantastic shot. And it's a bit of a handling characteristic, really, of a front-wheel drive touring car. As much as these Giuliettas are really quite grippy and often front-limited, more so than anything in my experience. Again, could be entirely wrong there, could just be me, my terrible driving. But front-wheel drive car, engine sat over the front, and if you're going down a big cambered drop in elevation, just like the Paddock Hill bend, I can imagine it's all too easy for the back end to run away from you and step out, and that seems to have been the case for Matt Daly there. Ruined that lap attempt, of course, so with 2 minutes 30 seconds on the clock, it is really all systems go for these drivers now. This is the last attempt, or last couple of attempts really, to try and push towards that pole position here at Brands Hatch now. As we watch on board, as Alan Matthews, he was able to carry on his fast lap attempt, and he will be one of the next drivers to head down towards the start-finish line. He is about to come onto Clearways now, actually gets it a little bit wrong, heading through Sheens and Stirlings here, but should be able to carry on. This is, of course, an out lap. In fact, it's not an out lap. This was a fast lap attempt for Alan Matthews, so this will be not an ideal sign for his kind of mini qualifying stint that we're currently going through here. So we'll see what he can do now with the remaining time here in qualifying. Elsewhere on track, we have Alan Matthews. He's just crossed the line. We're on board with him at the moment, of course. Will Inglis we'll have a look at now, as he's coming towards the end of his out lap and will be the first drivers to set their final fast laps in this session. Now the blue and yellow liveried car sets off for one more quick attempt here at Brands Hatch, and it will be one more quick attempt because we've only got 1 minute 20 on the clock. And did it go just a little bit wrong for Will Inglis there? Yes, it did. So that is Will Inglis out of this qualifying session, much in the same way that Matt Daly had issues on his previous lap attempt. We see that Alan Matthews suffers the same fate. So we'll go on board now with Steve Knight. In fact, no, we'll go on board with Jack Hudson. Jack Hudson currently 5th in this session, right in there in the mid-pack, a 131.5 that he is trying to improve on this last lap, a 1 minute 31.7. So he's consistent. He's consistent with his qualifying pace. Unfortunately, isn't able to beat it just yet. So we'll see what he can do in just a moment's time. He's currently heading through the Hawthorne Bend, the Sector 2 part of the lap. One of my favourite parts of any track, really, the Pilgrim's Drop, running all the way through these couple of corners. Some amazing overtaking opportunities. Not a track, actually, that I've had enough opportunities to race on, really. I wish I had a few more. Just 3 cars now left to set a fast lap here in this qualifying session, as Alan Matthews just about squeezes one more lap in. That last lap, 130.6. He's trying to improve on a 130.3 and is currently predicted to do the same. Of course, we've only gone through a couple of mini sectors so far, so every single corner counts now as we head through Druids up towards the Graham Hill bend in just a moment. Goes out as wide as possible so we can get the car turned in, and tries to get it turned in as quickly as possible. Of course, you've got to balance that with the grass on the right hand side of the track, but he does so with ease. And that is an end to the session as well. For who is that? Who just dived into the pits? Either way, only 2 cars to go now. It is Matt Daly and Alan Matthews. Matt Daly, let's have a look at his lap at this point in time. It's not looking like an improvement for him so far. We don't have predicted because we weren't on board in time here. So as it crosses the line, What will it be for Alan Matthews? It will be a 1:30. Apologies for Matt Daly. It'll be a 1:30.4. So now all we can do is wait to see if in the final sector here, Alan Matthews can push towards Matt Daly and get a couple more tenths under his belt. It'll be a tall order really, because you've only got the run-down clearways and the clock curve to go effectively at this point in the lap. To 1:30.3 predicted so far for Alan Matthews. That will only match or just be ever so slightly slower than his previous best. So as it stands, Alan Matthews in second position. The time crawls up as well. He doesn't dive into the pits. He still thinks maybe there's something to do, but as it stands here, it's going to be Matt Daly sat on pole position here for round 4 at Brands Hatch. That was towards the end a bit of a nail-biting qualifying session, but unfortunately for the likes of Alan Matthews, Will Inglis, Jack Hodson, not too much they could do towards the end of the session to challenge the all-empowering Matt Daly here. He has posted another fantastic lap, a 1:30.2, quite early on in the session actually, to seize him sit on pole. Alan Matthews front row as well, still a great starting position for a race at Brands Hatch, and don't count out the likes of Will Inglis and Barry Clayton as well. Anything can happen at the Paddock Hill Bend, of course. So here at qualifying, we'll catch you in just a few minutes for race 1 of this double header weekender. Don't go anywhere. And here we are then, just 10 seconds to go until lights out. It is Matt Daly and Alan Matthews on the front row of the grid. Will Inglis, Barry Clayton just closely behind. We do have 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away for 25 minutes here at Brands Hatch, heading down to the Paddock Hill bend. Then who will come out on top? It's a good launch for Matt Daly. Actually, good launch for Will Inglis as well. He's now side by side with Alan Matthews. Loses out there, concedes the place to Alan Matthews to make sure everyone makes it through the Paddock Hill bend cleanly, which is certainly a good move from Will Inglis there. Matt Daly able to romp away somewhat. But Will Inglis very much keeping Alan Matthews under control here, so we'll watch to see how this battle forms up. Meanwhile, we're seeing Jack Houghton and Barry Clayton going side by side now, heading through the Graham Hill bend here. Jack Houghton actually winning out in this case as we head through Surtees in just a moment, up until 4th position now for Jack Houghton. Barry Clayton, and not the quickest start of the race for him, as we believe Rosie Oliver and Rob Whitney have had a bit of contact. Rob Whitney actually, once again, just like in qualifying, going the other way on the tyre setup here, deciding that the soft side, the slick tyre, really not the tyre that he enjoys. So he's gone for the super soft in qualifying and now goes on to the medium in the race. So we'll see how this plays out for him. Will he have an advantage later on into the race? Matt Daly hasn't built up the gap I think that he would have wanted so far on lap 1, because Alan Matthews is very much keeping him in check now with that purple sector 2 actually for Alan Matthews. So hunting down Matt Daly as we head now onto clearways, with Will Inglis not too far behind at all, really, as we see Rob Whitney and Steve Knight now enjoying a bit of a battle. So Rob Whitney could be a bit of a sitting duck at the very start of this race. While it will help him out later on, I think the soft compound of tyre on the likes of Rosie Oliver or Steve Knight's car is going to be helping those two guys out immensely as we head down the Brabham Straight. Now we can see that Rob Whitney's still very much more focused on what's going on behind than in front. Meanwhile, this battle between Barry Clayton and Jack Houghton continues on as we head into Druids. This time, Jack Houghton does stick it on the inside, but Barry Clayton, fantastic moves there, hangs it around the outside and is able to actually get the position as we head into the Graham Hill bend once again. That was a great move, great bravery from Barry Clayton there, as we see Andrew Brammer and Rosie Oliver now potentially getting into a bit of a battle. Good progress so far for Rosie Oliver, hasn't dropped back too much at all and is instead challenging the cars just up in front. Meanwhile, Matt Daly controlling what is not a big gap, but controlling it well, and I think Alan Matthews is probably far more focused on Will Inglis behind. If I was Alan Matthews, I'd be pleading Will Inglis to say, come on, let's work together, but Will Inglis has had a bit of an off, and that was a bit of an off as we headed towards a Dingle Dell there. He doesn't want to do that too many times. He'll pick up a little bit too much dirt, and as he tries to jump back onto the track, it could go very wrong indeed. Of course, you need at least a few corners here in this setup to scrub off the dirt that you build up onto the tyres before you can continue on at full grip. Of course, it affects temperature and everything as well, and mainly confidence. I think it'll knock your confidence quite a bit. But Will Inglis is able to carry on in P3 at the moment and actually put the pressure back on Alan Matthews as he head further into the lap. And speaking of pressure, Jack Houghton and Barry Clayton, I really do hope that this is a battle that goes on for quite some time in this race, because it's looking to be a good one already, as we see Matt Daly posting the fastest lap of the race so far. Barry Clayton heads into the Paddock Hill bend, goes in a little bit too hot, it must be said, has to jump on the brakes there, and the back axle obviously unloaded heading through that steep right-hander, completely locks up and produces a bit of a smoke screen for the cars behind. This has now brought him very much under pressure from Jack Houghton and potentially Andrew Brammer as well, as we head through Graham Hill once again. Sorry, I've been around the karting scene a little bit this week, so I might say karts a couple of times there, but all cars there jumping off the track, as is the traditional touring car line. Will Inglis, I believe, has had he's had a substantial issue heading through Surtees. Has dropped back down to P7 now. We saw this actually last week at Suzuka in the single seater action. Just the odd mistake or two beginning to creep in, which is not ideal for his championship hopes in this series. Just that one small mistake can cost you big time throughout the rest of the weekend. Of course, it will benefit him later on for the reverse grid, and will hopefully, for his sake, hopefully he can climb his way back up through the order, and it will certainly provide a bit of interesting racing here, as he's already up onto the cars up in front. His best lap so far has been a 131.1, and that actually was the previous lap of the race. Then we have Rosie Oliver at 132s. In fact, all the cars really up until Alan Matthews and Matt Daly in the 132s. So if there's anyone who's going to provide us with some fantastic racing action here, it's going to be Will Inglis now, as he tries to charge his way through the field. Speaking of trying to charge your way up through the field, Alan Matthews is trying his utmost to keep Matt Daly at bay, but Matt Daly with a 130.581 is just that little bit quicker, I'd say, on average, although Alan Matthews on that previous lap has just posted a 1:30.502. So a great lap from Alan Matthews there, bringing that fight to Matt Daly. But can he continue that on into the remaining 20 minutes of this race? We'll only have to wait and see. So that gap still remaining at about 0.7 of a second. A small gap as well between Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton. Despite everything that went on in front of them, they're still enjoying their battling at this point in time. And of course the stakes rising ever so slightly, as now this is a battle for a podium scoring position in this race. So it means everything now to these drivers, as Will Inglis does make his way past Rosie Oliver now and up into 6th position. Will Rosie fight this? I imagine for the sake of her race, and she's a great sportswoman as well. She's very sporting, always concedes the position when she feels like it will benefit both of their races. I am sure that she's not really going to fight this one too much, and is instead going to think about her own race, which is a very level-headed and logical way of thinking about it. It's the way that I try to go about my racing, but I'm nowhere near intelligent enough when I'm in the cockpit myself. So Will Inglis up into 6th position now, heading around the Clark curve, back onto that start-finish straight once again, as he tries to pick off the cars up in front to get back into that podium fight that he, I think we all know he deserves to be in. 0.7 of a second now between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. That gap builds ever so slightly through Druids. Let's have a look and stay on board with these two cars for a lap and see if there are any differences in terms of their lines at this point in time. There shouldn't be too much of a difference in terms of setup here at Brands Hatch. I think it's fairly cut and dry for these Giulietta WTCRs. It'll just be, I think, down to pure skill and talent, which is what we like to see. Heading now down towards the Pilgrim's Drop in just a second. One of the more exhilarating parts of the track actually to drive on. It's all bravery is the Hawthorne, but apologies, yeah, is the Hawthorne Bend. I do know where I am on track, I promise. The Hawthorne Bend, the braking zone, you do need a fairly decent stab of brakes there, but you will bleed off time all the way down to Sterling's really if you do brake too much, especially in these slightly lower powered cars, although by no means slow, slightly lower powered. So drivers, there's a very fine balancing act that the drivers have to play really. You know, you don't want to brake too little because you'll be off into the English countryside, but you want to make sure that you carry enough pace around, especially when you've got some rivals nearby, like Alan Matthews does. Meanwhile, Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson, their battle continues on. This time around, it's Jack Hodson in the lead as we get onto the Brabham Straight once again. 0.3 of a second separating these two cars now. Actually, Jack Hodson a tenth or so quicker on that previous lap, as is to be expected. Barry Clayton locking up at the entry of the corner, and actually Jack Hodson locking up on the exit of the corner there. So an interesting one as we head now into Druids. Jack Hodson was a little bit wider on entry. Barry Clayton saw a slight opportunity, put the nose of his car there and hugged the inside of the corner as wide as possible, but I think lost a little bit of speed as a result of that. And now we see Barry Clayton using as much of the track as possible on exit of the Graham Hill Bend to keep that speed up as we head into Surtees now. I'll try it again. Smoke pouring out of the cart. There we go. They can add 2 to the tally of me saying cart instead of car. Jack Hodson's car pouring smoke out of it now as he locks up once again as we head down the Pilgrim's Drop for another time around it. There we see Will Inglis. He's got ahead of Andrew Brammer now, and that battling that he was enjoying with Andrew Brammer has actually brought Rosie Oliver back into contention against Andrew Brammer now. So we wait to see what those two drivers can do in terms of pace at the moment. In terms of outright pace, Andrew Brammer wins out. It's a 1:30.085. Rosie Oliver a 1:32.7. So about 7 tenths in Andrew Brammer's hands there, but on that previous lap, Rosie Oliver was about a second quicker. So at this stage in the race, it's anyone's game, I think, between these two cars. So we'll continue watching on to see what happens. Will Inglis, though, has cleared Andrew Brammer now and is now very much more focused on Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson up in front. And this is actually the ideal scenario for Will Inglis. Well, I suppose the ideal scenario would have been not spin out at Surtees and carry on as usual, but this is the next most ideal scenario for Will Inglis, as we see Barry Clayton having another look up the inside there. Because Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson are so embroiled in this battling up in front, it's slowing them down and it's allowing Will Inglis to pick off those fast lap times. 1:30.6 is 1:30.5 as he's currently running at this point in time. His fastest laps of the race so far. They're about a second or about 7 tenths of a second faster than the two cars up in front. So in just a few laps time, I think anyone would put their money on Will Inglis being back up with these two battling cars in just a moment's time. Now they are side by side heading down the Pilgrim's Drop as we run into the Hawthorne Bend. Once again, it's going to be Jack Hodson with the inside liner. Might have to concede the position though, as Barry Clayton hangs it round the outside, is still side by side, and for the next right-hander will potentially have the upper hand, but he doesn't. Jack Hodson is able to take that corner a little bit more cleanly up the inside and takes the position, or rather defends that position once again. Now as we head down through Sheen's in just a moment and Sterling's, but Barry Clayton is off track, gets a little bit upset as a result of that, and we're on to clearways once again. But can you notice one big difference? It's Will Inglis. That blue Giulietta is now in the mix once again. Steve Knight has an issue further down the lap, has lost his rear wing as a result, so I can't imagine that car will be too fun to drive at all now as we head back onto the Brabham Straight. It's Jack Hodson in P3, Barry Clayton in P4, but with a distinctive gap between these two cars, it must be said, of nearly about half a second, I would say. In fact, there is 6/10 of a second, and Will Inglis now very much putting the pressure on Barry Clayton now, as Will Inglis has a look up the inside heading into Druids. That was going to be very brave indeed, Will, and it just about worked out for him there, because it allowed Barry Clayton, who gives him a little bit of a love tap there, to say, "Oi, that was my corner," and we head through the Graham Hill Bend once again. These two trading paint oh so close as we head through Surtees. Now Will Inglis has the inside line here, is going to take the position from Barry Clayton in the end, but I just get the feeling that Barry Clayton's going to fight it even more so. All of this has benefited Jack Hodson immensely, it must be said. Heading down the Pilgrim's Drop now, seconds clear of Will Inglis and Barry Clayton. I thought it was going to be the case that Will Inglis would be able to just pounce on both Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton, but I suspect that this track is just a little bit too narrow for him to take both cars in one fell swoop, and has instead had to wait and pick them off one by one. He's done that to Barry Clayton now, although, as I said, I think he's going to fight it back. And now I imagine Will Inglis is very much focused on trying to catch up with Jack Hodson. But just see there, Barry Clayton saw a gap heading into Sterling and thought, you know what, I'm going to plant the car there and see if I can outbrake him. It didn't work, unfortunately, as we head down clearways, and in fact he's lost some time as a result. But Will Inglis up into P4 now with a decent gap behind. And I think it gets a little bit easier for Will Inglis at this point in time. Now, Jack Hodson running in P3 at this point in time. He'll be, I think, waiting with bated breath to see just how long it will take for Will Inglis to catch up to him now. Or has Will Inglis taken a bit too much out of his tyres? We'll see in just a couple of laps' time, I think, ladies and gentlemen. On that previous lap then, a 1:30.7 for Alan Matthews. So he's very much the quickest car out on track at this point in time. He caught up to Matt Daly a little bit on that previous lap. Jack Hodson then the previous lap at 1:31.2, whereas Will Inglis was 1:31.9, obviously owing to the battling he was in the midst of. In terms of their fastest laps, a 31.2 for Jack Hodson and a 30.6 for Will Inglis. So Will Inglis, we know, has that slightly higher pace potential, and we'll see as we enter the final stages of this race now what Will Inglis can do to charge against Jack Hodson. The tyres will begin to wear off ever so slightly, but the fuel loads get lighter as well. And potentially we're starting to see that tyre wear begin to creep in for Jack Hodson under pressure. Maybe a small mistake or two creeping in. And in fact, a big mistake creeping in there as we head through Sheen's. And he's off the track, is Jack Hodson. Down to P5. Barry Clayton gets past as well. That gravel trap, designed to catch a Formula 1 car, of course, slows down the WTCR cars at quite an effective rate there. So we see Jack Hodson dropping down to P5. Barry Clayton in P4, Will Inglis up into P3, where he was about 15 minutes ago. Make that 10 minutes ago, perhaps. So he certainly made it more difficult for himself, but Will Inglis is back up into the podium scoring positions. Let's see if Barry Clayton can bring the fight against him, though. We need to have a look at this battle for the lead that's been going on for quite some time, though, as it's Matt Daly who's been leading for some time, but the margins got a little bit less comfortable for him as we head through the Graham Hill Bend now, 2/10 separating these two cars. And Alan Matthews looks for a way to get past, uses as much of the track as possible. As we head into Surtees, he's thinking the inside line is open for me, but Matt Daly is going to close that off. I think now we're seeing that the tyres are beginning to drop off ever so slightly, heading down towards the Hawthorne Bend in just a moment's time, of course, because both cars are running a little bit wide there. Alan Matthews wider than Matt Daly, so has dropped back as a result. In all this battling, the battling that was for P3 for quite a while in this race continues on. This time it's for P4. It's Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson once again. Half a second separating these two cars. We'll wait to see if they can close up and enjoy some more battling in the late stages of this race. In terms of pace at the moment, we'll have in a lap or so, a clear idea of where Willingless sits against his competitors now. It's been a little while since he's had clean air to enjoy some running in, and we'll see that in just a second now for him. Alan Matthews certainly doesn't have any clean air though, and is certainly not producing any with that smoke as we head through the Clark curve, but Matt Daly certainly isn't resting easy like Willingless might be doing so now, as both drivers very much pushing at this stage in the race. The times have dropped back ever so slightly into the 131s as we get later on in terms of this race. See 0.3 of a second gap now as we head into Druids. Matt Daly defending under braking as Alan Matthews tries to find his way past under braking, and there's going to be a bit of a switch back here as we head into the Graham Hill bend. There's contact as I don't think Matt Daly was expecting him to be so far alongside. That upsets the car, forces it off wide onto the grass of Graham Hill bend, and now Alan Matthews leads the race. Not the cleanest pass we've ever seen, but a pass nonetheless, and certainly nothing too unusual for the average touring car fan, as we now see Alan Matthews in the lead of this race. Matt Daly though only 0.3 of a second behind, and I just get the feeling that this is going to continue on with the final 8 minutes of this race. Of course, if you want to see what the timing is looking like at this stage in the race, you can follow along at aroc.assetocorsaservers.com, or one word /live-timing, and that will show you exactly what each driver is doing through each sector, what tyres they're on, what car they're on, although not too much of a difference there in this series, and what their last and best times are as well as some other little useful facts and figures as well. Apologise for that flickering there. We'll try and resolve that for race 2. But Alan Matthews now in control of this race, but the question is if he can keep control of this race, because we know Matt Daly is certainly not an easy opponent. Heading on to the Brabham Straight once again now. Matt Daly there, weaving, it seemed. I'm not sure if he's just trying to get the best position for the entry into Paddock Hill Bend, or maybe you just need to reach across his sim rig and grab a drink or something. Heading into Druids now. One of the more complicated parts of the lap is Druids. You've got immense speeds and differences in camber, followed by a heavy braking zone here. It's really a good challenge, this circuit. It's one of my, as I've said already, one of my favourites. And speaking of challenges, who can challenge Matt Daly in this championship? Matt Daly currently leading 93 points at round 4 already. His nearest rival is Willingless with 43 points to his name, and that nearest rival is Willingless and Alan Matthews. They're both on 43 points, and as it stands, Alan Matthews leading this race will, of course, take that second position in the championship heading into race 2. It's a very important race. This is the first race of the weekend for Alan Matthews, because he needs to try and close the gap to Matt Daly. I can't remember the last time we saw a 50-point gap when we've only got 93 points to the leader at any point in the championship. It's been a great start to the year for Matt Daly, and I have a feeling it will carry on. He's the only A+ rated safety driver. Sorry, only safety A+. I'll try that again. Only A+ safety rated driver. There we go. That was the sentence I was trying to form. At this stage in the year, he has been driving impeccably, has Matt Daly, and fortunately for him, I think Alan Matthews has just had the upper hand in race 1, as we see Barry Clayton and, oh dear, what's happened here? Willingless has had a big issue, and I suspect that was with Barry Clayton, because they both went off at the same time. That forces Willingless into the pits, and Barry Clayton off the track as well, of course, battling for P3 at one point, now finds himself in P6 alongside Andrew Brammer. Who would have expected this so late on in the race? Heading through the Clark curve now, a bit of a lock-up here, still side by side as we jump onto the Brabham Straight. Who will win out as we run down towards the Paddock Hill Bend? Of all the corners on track, Paddock Hill Bend probably the one that you least want to be too wide on, although we've seen it many times before. Running down through Paddock Hill Bend, it's going to be Rosie Oliver, apologies, not Andy Brammer, who concedes. And it's Barry Clayton up into P5. Rosie Oliver having a good race then so far, up into P6, owing to the misfortunes of others. That is a great shame for Willingless, who's already going to lose out second position owing to Alan Matthews' strong drive so far, which is looking even stronger. He now leads the race by 1.5 seconds, but now we see that Willingless diving into the pits. He will just pick up a pittance in terms of points if he is actually classified. We're still perhaps a little bit too early on. We'll have to wait and see if he is classified. I think he will be. But Barry Clayton then, very much under pressure from Rosie Oliver, down in P5. I think he'll be kicking himself ever so slightly. This promotes, out of nowhere it seems, Andy Brammer up into P4. And we've seen this in the past in both series throughout the years now. Andy Brammer just always has these very quiet races, but he's always somehow works his way up, whether it just be through decent pace or misfortunes of others, works his way up to P4 or that kind of position, works his way up to the top of the midfield, and comes home with a good haul of points. And as a result, he's always relatively high up in the championship fight. And it's nice to see, actually. We don't often look at Andrew Brammer as much as we perhaps should on the race streams, because he just has these rather lonesome and rather strong races, really. So he's currently running in P4. Matt Daly, meanwhile, see him running a little bit wide on the exit of Druids there. Luckily, he was able to get it back on track without the car being too upset with him. But I think the tyres are really starting to drop off now, and that could be why we're starting to see mistakes creep in for some of these drivers. In terms of our fastest car on track at this point in time, that accolade goes to Alan Matthews, our race leader, at 1:30.8. It should be mentioned that Will Inglis was very close, and he was the second fastest car on track before he had his big issue, so a shame for him really there. And Alan Matthews is the quickest driver overall as well, so that could be anything. It could just be exhaustion in the car, could be confidence with the track, it could even be down to setup if the likes of Matt Daly are running a slightly more qualifying oriented setup, a suspension geometry that wears out the tyres a little bit more. We could start to see later on in the race that tyre wear get higher, the tyre temps get higher, and the car begin to lose grip. Either way, whatever has happened, Alan Matthews is certainly on top so far, and I think must be one of the favourites going into race 2. Of course, though, race 2 is always our reverse grid race, so we don't quite know what's going to happen beyond lap 1 or lap 2. So the reverse grid, it will be something that the likes of Rob Whitney and Steve Knight, Will Inglis, are looking out for as well, to try and make sure they can turn their fortunes around a little bit. In terms of Rob Whitney's pace, Rob Whitney was someone who said we were quite interested in owing to his slightly alternate strategy. And I don't think the medium compound of tyre is working out for him, unfortunately. In the 134s at this point in time, compared to the likes of Rosie Oliver, Steve Knight. Steve Knight in the 133s, Rosie Oliver in the mid-132s. So I don't think the medium compound of tyre quite what he needed for this race. I suspect it might be better to go for the faster wearing tyre and just kind of hold out later on in the race to try and bring it home, especially if that's what the rest of the rivals are doing. Speaking of the rest of the rivals, though, Alan Matthews has now got a chance to see some of them for the first time in a little while as we head through Sheens and Dingledell in just a moment, as he has some lap traffic to contend with. Second car is lapped, of course, the first being Will Inglis, unfortunately, after a disastrous premature end to his race. Gets past Steve Knight, though, with ease. Steve Knight very courteous, of course, in getting out of the way. We're usually very good at that here in this series, which is always nice to see. There's no actual nothing forcing you in the regulations to do so. You're entitled to your part of the racetrack, and you can push as much as you want. But nice to see, even without blue flags, drivers conceding and allowing others to enjoy their racing, as of course we often end up in slightly different races at this late stage in the race. Count how many times I said race in that last sentence. Either way, Matt Daly now 2 seconds behind Alan Matthews, and it's starting to look like a strong race for Alan Matthews, unless anything untoward happens in the final couple of laps, which has certainly been the case on a few occasions, so anything could happen yet. But it is Jack Hodson now running in P3, and for the first time running comfortably in P3 as well. Not only has he got no cars near him whatsoever, so she'll be able to bring it home with a nice decent points haul here, he's also doing so at great pace as well. He's now into the 130s. I was wondering slightly, compared to say Will Inglis or Barry Clayton earlier on, whether or not Jack Hodson would have the pace to challenge for the top of the midfield or the podium as well. But in this race, he certainly delivered. He seems to have got into a bit of a rhythm, a bit of a groove, and is now comfortably in the low 131s or high 130s as well. So make that maybe for mid 131s at this stage in the race. So as we head through the Pilgrim's Drop once again, it's looking rather good for Jack Hodson. In fact, all the drivers now looking a little bit more comfortable than they have been perhaps at other stages in the race. I think the nearest looming kind of battle is going to be between Alan Matthews or Matt Daly. If Matt Daly is able to maybe force an error or pick up the pace ever so slightly later on, or it will be between Andrew Brammer and Barry Clayton. In terms of their pace at the moment, Barry Clayton is about half a second, in fact, no, apologies. In terms of outright pace, he's about half a second faster. In terms of their current pace, he's a second and a half faster than Andrew Brammer. So as we head on to clearways once again, a bit of a lock-up for Barry Clayton. I think Barry Clayton might have been the car we've seen locking up the most, so I suspect his brake bias is probably pushed quite heavily towards the rear. He might be really leaning on that car, getting it into some of the corners. So Barry Clayton will be, towards the end of the race at least, pushing on a bit towards Andrew Brammer. We're on board though at the moment with Alan Matthews on the penultimate lap of this race. So it's looking good for Alan Matthews. What has been a very strong race from him indeed. He kept the challenge. He kept putting that challenge to Matt Daly. Didn't really slip up at any stage before or while he was P2, and had just eventually waited for Matt Daly to lose that pace, wait for that pace to drop off, or maybe a slight error there, and was able to just get past with relative ease in the end. So it's a strong drive here for Alan Matthews in that push to get towards him in the championship standings. Now, I do believe Steve Knight and Andrew Rammer have had a bit of an issue here. Yes, they have. Steve Knight, lapped traffic, of course, made contact with Andrew Rammer. Andrew Rammer has been able to carry on and hasn't lost out too much pace at all, really, which is good to see. But Steve Knight has a fairly ruined car. He's already a lap down, so just needs to make sure he can bring it home comfortably now as we head on to the Brabham Straight once again with Alan Matthews. What a drive it has been for him so far as we start this final lap of the race. 4.5 seconds now between him and Matt Daly. This is just a case of bringing it home and bringing it home safely now. Hopefully nothing goes awry on the final lap, although knowing my history with the commentator's curse, I wouldn't be too surprised if that ends up being the case. Meanwhile, Andrew Rammer and Barry Clayton, this battle is very much on between these two now, so let's see what happens now as we get onto the Brabham Straight with these two drivers, as Alan Matthews is clear just that little bit more of Matt Daly now. A big lock up there for Andrew Rammer heading through the Paddock Hill bend as we run down towards Druids once again, the smoke pouring out of his car. Doesn't want to do that too many times on this lap. He might end up facing the wrong direction. What a shame that would be to do so on the last lap here. Speaking of the last lap, we're on board with Alan Matthews as he leads the last lap, heading into Dingle in just a moment's time here. But a very strong race indeed, and I'm looking forward to the reverse grid race, actually see what he can do. Now he's got that little bit more confidence behind him with that race victory under his belt. What can he do against Matt Daly, as of course they'll be further down the grid. Driver to watch out for, of course, will be actually knocked out of the reversal of the reverse grid race. Of course, it's only the top few positions, so for Will Inglis, he won't enjoy the benefits of being a few laps on the current lap. That doesn't matter anyway, because it's Alan Matthews now heading down the Brabham Straight to take the Race 1 victory. Congratulations, Alan, for a brilliant drive there, bringing the challenge to P2. Matt Daly here. Commiserations, but congratulations anyway. It was a good, strong race from both cars there, and I'm sure they both enjoyed it as he begins to partake in some rallycross. Congratulations also thoroughly deserved for Jack Odson, who rounds out the podium here with P3 after a strong battle with Barry Clayton and Will Inglis as well, for that matter. As we see now heading on to the Brabham Straight, it's going to be Andrew Rammer and Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton closing up there, pretty much a photo finish. It's Andrew Rammer who wins out, takes home P4 in the end, 30.73 seconds off the lead, and then Barry Clayton, unfortunately for him, comes home P5 with a 30.76 seconds off the lead there. I think a little bit less rear wing, and maybe Barry Clayton could have taken it there, but that is a fantastic photo finish for both of those drivers battling for P4. Well done to all involved. Rosie Oliver comes home P6, and Rob Whitney will be coming home P7. Steve Knight comes home P8, and Will Inglis classified P9 at the end there. So a bit of a rollercoaster finish there for us at the end, as Matt Daly has finished with his rallycross career and now takes part in some Formula Drift. So let's see how many points out of 10 we're going to score this next drift, this front-wheel drive touring car. No, that looked like a relatively... In fact, no, Alan Matthews is now taking part. The handbrake very much being utilised here. That was nearly in the barrier, but well done, Matt, for keeping it out of said barrier. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, has to dive into the gravel. The rear tyres, I'm sure, really not very happy at this stage with these drivers. They didn't get exercised that hard in the racing, but they're certainly getting exercise now, as Matt Daly near enough misses the pit lane there, but just about makes it. Alan Matthews does the same, in fact, and that will round out our running for race 1. So we'll catch you in just a few minutes for race 2, the reverse grid race here at Brands Hatch. So then, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the action here at Brands Hatch. We're on the grid, just over 30 seconds to go until lights out for the reverse grid race. It is Rob Whitney and Rosie Oliver lining up on the front row, Barry Clayton and Andrew Brammer, row 2. Then we have Jack Hodson, Matt Daly, row 3. And then it's Alan Matthews, Steve Knight, row 4. And then Will Inglis, unfortunately for him, rounding up right at the back of the field where he finished in race 1 owing to his issues earlier on. We'll see what he can do then with not long to go until lights out. Let's see how he can work his way up to the field, just like he did successfully at the start of race 1. Rob Whitney then still on that medium compound of tyre, as is Matt Daly actually. That is a bit of a shock, so we'll have a look at that in just a moment's time. And we are away after 6 red lights on the gantry. Big set of 11s for everyone pretty much there, so everyone getting a pretty much even getaway as we head into the Paddock Hill Bend for another start here at Brands Hatch. It has been a good start actually for both Rob Whitney and Rosie Oliver. It's going to be Rosie Oliver who leads heading into Druids, though. She's late on the brakes around the outside. Fantastic move, Rosie, and up into first position. Meanwhile, it's Jack Hodson who's into P3. Andrew Brammer loses out there as we are 3 wide between Barry Clayton, Will Inglis and Matt Daly at Graham Hill Bend, and that was only going to end one way for someone. Unfortunately, this time around it was for Barry Clayton, who drops all the way back down the order. Matt Daly then on that medium compound of tyre is currently running in P5, just behind Andrew Brammer. Will Inglis lost out there actually with that slight bit of contact as well, but is in a much better position than Barry Clayton is. He's side by side with Alan Matthews as we head down the Paddock Hill Bend. Our race winner, of course, Alan Matthews, as is near enough. I think there was actually contact between Steve Knight and Barry Clayton heading down the Pilgrim's Drop, sorry, not Paddock Hill. And we head towards the end of Sector 2. Now that is a great start for some. Matt Daly in particular, I think, it has really benefited here. Although, got to give plaudits to Rosie Oliver. It's the sibling rivalry. It continues on between Rosie Oliver and Jack Hodson, sliding her way through to clearways. That looked absolutely fantastic, although not the quickest way to get around the corner. I believe there's been contact between Matt Daly and Rob Whitney. There has both of our medium compound runners making contact, and as we head through the Clark curve now, it could be Rob Whitney who wins out this time around, but Matt Daly benefits ever so slightly from the small slipstream effect you get in these cars. Rosie Oliver, meanwhile, having a look up the inside of the Paddock Hill Bend, both cars pouring smoke out as they lock up on down towards Druids once again. Meanwhile, it's going to be 3 wide heading into Druids between Andrew Brammer, Matt Daly and Rob Whitney here. Rob Whitney and Andrew Brammer make contact. Matt Daly says, "Thank you very much, I'll take that position," and up into P3 for Matt Daly. Now, apologies, Rob Whitney and Alan Matthews losing out there, as Alan Matthews still hasn't rejoined the track just yet, is able to do so. Might have gained an ever so slight advantage there as Barry Clayton gets ahead now and up into P6. It's all changed for the positions here, ladies and gentlemen, as we see Will Inglis currently running in P5, but he's fighting against Andrew Brammer rather, as we run down towards the Pilgrim's Drop once again. Meanwhile, Jack Hodson has got ahead of his sibling Rosie Oliver now up into first position, and Rosie Oliver drops down into second, but only half a second behind here. Matt Daly, meanwhile, is in a great position now. He's one of 2 medium compound runners and has worked his way up into into third position, as Will Inglis and Andrew Brammer make contact as they are side by side battling now, heading in to Sheens in just a moment. Here we are now through Sheens into Sterling's in just a second. Barry Clayton fancies his chances of getting past Andrew Brammer now, but wants to make sure he can do so without compromising his battle against Alan Matthews here. This is a great race so far, ladies and gentlemen, as we head now on board with Will Inglis onto the Brabham Straight once again. He's currently running in 4th, actually has what is relative to everyone else a comfortable margin between him and the rest of the cars. Currently running in P4, so a good turnaround really for him in this race. As we see Rosie Oliver, Jack Hodson heading into Druids once again, but this time the gap was that little bit larger. Matt Daly, meanwhile, running comfortably in P3 on the medium compound of tyre now. While I didn't quite see in the first race, Rob Whitney, that medium compound of tyre didn't seem to quite work for him. I think he was just out of position and couldn't quite get the medium tyres to light up for him and respond in the way that he would have wanted. Matt Daly, though, we of course saw his pace dropped off substantially at the end of race 1. Which is something we've seen in the past, actually, with the WTCRs. So I suspect that Matt Daly is calling back to that experience and is thinking, you know what, race 1, it was really the end that compromised me and lost me that race win. As we see, Rosie Oliver actually takes back the lead of the race. No, she doesn't, apologies. So I suspect that Matt Daly has said, you know what, I'll compromise my race start ever so slightly and benefit immensely later on from the harder compound of tyre that should have a little bit more life left in it towards the end. In terms of his pace at the moment, Matt Daly is there or thereabouts with the leaders. He's a few tenths ahead of Rosie Oliver, so he's closing up the gap to her, but is about 4 tenths down on Jack Hodson. So that, of course, will be at its strongest. That gap will be at its strongest at this stage in the race, but we expect that it should close up ever so slightly the further into the race we go. Someone just had a big off at the Clark curve. I don't think they have. I think it was just a big puff of smoke. Steve Knight currently running in 8th position. Meanwhile, Willingless under pressure here, heading through the Paddock Hill bend. Not quite side by side, but not far off it, that is for sure. As Rosie Oliver, once in P1, now running in P4 as Willingless finds his way past, heading through Druids now. So potentially Rosie is working the cars a little bit too hard, or Druids going to just having a slightly out of position. She's going to be embroiled in some battling, and is going to hopefully try and make it as difficult as possible for the blokes around her to get past as we head through Surtees. Once more, some smoke I think has been a feature for every part, every corner of this lap so far. It's a proper touring car race. That's a good sign of a touring car race when you can see smoke billowing from every part of the lap, really. As we see there, Matt Daly 2 seconds off the lead of this race. I think this could spell some trouble really for Matt Daly at this stage. He might have to try and not compromise this race, maybe lose an odd position or two here or there to try and make sure his tyres are in the best position and he's got enough left in the car to fight later on, because what we're seeing now is now that some of the slower cars have dropped back, Jack Hodson's able to just focus on his race and break away from the pack behind on this soft compounded tyre. Matt Daly, still on those mediums, now has the likes of Willingless for company. Willingless on the softs is a good second faster lap in comparison to Matt Daly. Matt Daly is doing his utmost to keep Willingless behind and is doing a very good job of it, it must be said, given that pace delta, but is very much under pressure now as we head into the Paddock Hill bend. Those medium compounded tyres, I think, are hurting him, so he's going to have to try and fight for it later on, because I suspect Willingless, it's a matter of not if, but when. And here we see, heading into Druids, a bit of a switchback, decides to go around the outside, does Willingless. That's going to compromise him for the exit, so Matt Daly survives for one corner more now, heading through the Graham Hill. These two still battling on. Barry Clayton just ever so slightly ahead of Rosie Oliver, who's now under pressure from Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews, a bit of a quiet race start for him, as he's now side by side with Rosie Oliver, heading through Surtees. Now gets the position up into P5 for Alan Matthews. This is now where Alan Matthews needs to try and push towards those points positions that we know he deserves, especially after race one. Near enough makes a difference. Contact between Willingless and Matt Daly, heading down the Pilgrim's Drop, late on the brakes for Willingless, who's able to use that brake later on, of course, with the extra grip. Brake just a little bit harder without locking up, and gets P2 from Matt Daly. Matt Daly, and I don't think he will be, of course, he's an experienced racing driver, both in and out of the sim racing world. I don't think he'll be fazed by that. I think he will instead just sit back and, well, he should do at least. He should just be able to sit back and still put in the fast laps without getting too upset, really. He'll want to do that, I'm sure, but unfortunately for him, here is Barry Clayton now on the soft compound of tyre. This could be the undoing of him, the optioning of the medium compounded tyre here as we get onto the Brabham Straight. It's side by side between Matt Daly and Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton gets a nice strong run down the Brabham Straight. Well defended. No, it's not well defended by Matt. No, is it? Oh my God, what a save by Matt Daly. So late on the brakes and so hard on the brakes. The back end steps out. The car gets upset, but that drift makes that car wide enough to keep Barry Clayton at bay there. What a save by Matt Daly. That is some brilliant racing. I am sure Barry Clayton is, as much as he probably doesn't want to admit it, applauding him from the cockpit of that car, as that was a great catch by Matt Daly there. What a shot as well. That looked beautiful. What it was all about, of course. As, of course, there was ever so slight contact between the two, perhaps unsurprisingly. Got to give plaudits to Barry Clayton there as well, actually, for not just carrying on at the same speed and just ploughing into Matt Daly, dropping back ever so slightly to allow his rival to continue on. And now we have a bit of a two-pronged attack for Matt Daly. Oh dear, that slight bit of contact between Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton sees Barry Clayton spearing off into the distance, straight into the wall on the exit of the Hawthorne bend at a very high speed indeed. Barry Clayton now has no front wing at all. What a disaster for him in this race, dropping back down to P7. That makes Matt Daly's job just that little bit easier. And that was, I think, one of those very unfortunate racing incidents indeed. It's a very narrow track, is Brands Hatch, and that's one of the faster parts of it, is the Hawthorne bend. Anything could happen in the car. We might just not have caught a little bit of a twitch at the back end for Alan Matthews, both figuratively and literally with the car. And unfortunately, that was, I think, a bit of contact that couldn't be avoided. Great shame for Barry Clayton here, as he was very much in the mix as we were seeing his battle against Matt Daly. Meanwhile, Will Inglis 2 seconds down on Jack Hodson. All this battling in the top end of the midfield and for the podium positions has helped out Jack Hodson immensely here. 2.5 seconds now is his lead. It's his last lap, a 1:30.9, only beaten by Will Inglis, the car behind, a 1:30.5. In fact, it was a 1:30.3 is Will Inglis' best lap, so I suspect the battle for the lead, at least at this stage in the race, we'll have to see what happens later on, of course, might be between Jack Hodson and Will Inglis. 6/10 that delta in terms of outright pace, and that 2.5 second gap is closing up, it must be said. Now 1.8 as we head through Hawthorne, where we can see the time marks of Barry Clayton's now stricken and wounded Giulietta. It's Will Inglis now second in the purple sectors. For the past few laps, it was Jack Hodson, but now Will Inglis is on a bit of a charge. This is redemption for race 1 for Will Inglis. We know he has the pace. He showed that in race 1. Unfortunately, it just wasn't to be. He ended up in the pits, of course, and now this reverse grid race, although he actually started still at the back, has certainly reversed his fortunes as we head now down clearways, and it's P2 for Will Inglis. Meanwhile, Matt Daly and Alan Matthews, as they head through the clock themselves, are about 3/10, make that 1/10 apart, in fact, as we are back onto the Brabham Straight. Alan Matthews has some great pace here down the Brabham Straight, is able to get past before the Paddock Hill bend, but a bit of a switchback there. Matt Daly is going to try and get it stuck up the inside, isn't able to do so, has to jump on the brakes at the very last minute to avoid contact, but a brave move and a brave attempted move there from Matt Daly. Well taken, that position by Alan Matthews. Very opportunistic move down the Brabham Straight. That's not something you see every day. Some great battling going on around Matt Daly at this stage in the race. I think those tyres maybe not entirely happy in either car, of course. The one thing about mediums is they're a little bit cold early on. You've got to scrub them across the track with that lower grip. And I think the car is not looking quite as racy as it once was. To see that slight off around the Graham Hill bend there. He's able to carry on in P4 at this point in time. 7/10 separating Matt Daly and Alan Matthews. And Alan Matthews now continues on in the lead of this battle here, and currently sits with a position on the podium. Hoping to improve his position on the podium now is Will Inglis as we head through Stirlings and Sheens in just a moment's time. Less than a second separating these two cars now as we jump back onto clearways. Will Inglis using as much of the track as he dares, using all of those curbs. Of course, F1 drivers recently wanting to avoid the curbs because they're a bit of a tyre slasher in Qatar, as it turns out. We'll be there next week in the single-seaters, of course, so stay tuned for that one. But down the straight then, who wins out in terms of outright speed? It looks to be that Will Inglis has, I was about to say, the ever so slightly quicker car. It's very hard to judge here at Brands Hatch because, of course, the straight is not a straight in any way, shape or form. And it's so dependent on your run through the clock curve as well. 8/10 though between Jack Hodson and Will Inglis on that previous lap. Jack Hodson, I fear, his pace beginning to drop off ever so slightly now. I don't think Jack Hodson has enough experience. He's certainly got some experience. He's a very fast driver indeed. Hasn't got enough experience leading a race and controlling a race. He just hasn't, unfortunately, despite his pace, found himself in those positions too often yet. And I think he might have taken a bit too much out of his tyres early on. We know now from race 1 that the soft compounder tyre is not quite going to last you the 26.5 minutes that we race here at Brands Hatch. And some of the drivers, even in the previous race, the likes of Matt Daly, Barry Clayton, Alan Matthews, were starting to experience that at around the 8-minute mark, that the tyres were already starting to drop off. I think Jack Hodson could be experiencing that at the 12-minute mark. He might have been pushing for quite some time and is now lapping in the 1:31s. As a result of that, another lockup certainly won't help matters of him in that white Giulietta there. So we'll see what he can do, really, because Will Inglis is currently in the low 130s, not the low 131s, about a second of pace delta between these two cars. So as we head through the clock curve, once again, it's looking less and less comfortable for Jack Hodson now, jumping back onto the Brabham Straight once again. Let's see if anything will be tried just yet, just like we saw between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. Will Inglis, I can tell you, does have the upper hand, has the inside as well. Gets a nose out in front before the Paddock Hill bend, later on the brakes. Nice, clean move here. Has he compromised his exit, though? Will Jack Hodson be able to fight back? I don't think he will. and in fact, it's not challenged into Druids either. That is just a nice, clean and confident overtake for Will Inglis there as we head now into the final 10 minutes of this race. Will Inglis, of course, had no hope really of challenging for the lead in race 1. I'm happy to say, at least for his sake, his fortunes have been rather reversed, and that should at least be some solace for him in terms of his position in the championship standings. Speaking of the championship standings, let's have a brief look at them now. With Matt Daly, of course, on 93 points there. Not sure why he's still only on 93 points. Either way, Will Inglis has 83 points to his name. So again, not sure how he's gained so many points there. I think we might have an issue with our driver tallies there, unless there were some penalties to consider. Although I'm not sure on earth how Will Inglis gained so many points from the previous race. Either way, Alan Matthews 76 points. And that is accounting for drop scores as well, I believe. So quite early on, this might not be the most accurate point size, so we'll completely ignore that and pretend that I never even mentioned it. What were you talking about? Who mentioned championship standings? Either way, Will Inglis now 7/10 separating him and Jack Houghton. It's been a good strong lap for him actually, as we can see, 1 minute 30.6 on that previous lap, near enough his best, which at this stage in the race, given that the tyres will be dropping off ever so slightly, an impressive feat for him. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, obviously got ahead of Matt Daly a good few laps ago now and has built up his gap. It's at this stage that we'd start to see, with 10 minutes to go in the race, we would start to see Matt Daly have that upper hand now and be able to fight back with the medium compound tyre. We haven't quite seen that yet. It's a 4-second gap between him and Alan Matthews with 9 minutes to go. He needs to, in the next 2 or 3 laps, I'd say, start to show a bit of a pace advantage. In terms of their pace at the moment, it's 1 minute 33s for Matt Daly. Our other driver on medium compound tyre, being Rob Whitney, on the 1 minute 34s. So, about a second and a half delta between those two cars, and unfortunately for Matt Daly, even about a second half as well between him and the soft compound tyre runner. I think it's really right towards the end of the race that the soft compound tyre at times tries to drop off, really. I think it was a bold call by Matt Daly to jump onto the mediums. It didn't work out, I suspect. Who knows? I could be entirely wrong. In the final few minutes, we could see him storm away with 1 minute 28 laps and take the race lead. But luckily for Matt Daly, he's in a position in this championship where he can afford to maybe play around a little bit and see what works for him. But I think the medium compound of tyre not quite the answer at this stage. Meanwhile, we're going to have a look at the battling between Rosie Oliver and Barry Clayton, of course. They battled earlier on in this race. It was for a slightly higher point-scoring position, but we're still going to enjoy this battle nonetheless as we head down clearways and into the Clark Curve in just a moment. Rosie Oliver strong on the defence here. It's been one of Rosie's, I'd say, more impressive traits has been her defensive skills. She picked it up, obviously running through the AMs for quite some time earlier on. You're often on the defence, you end up in a bit of a pack battle, really, the AMs do. So I think she's carrying this forward into the rest of her racing. And doing a nice job here of keeping Barry Clayton at bay as we head through the Druids here. As Barry Clayton takes a slightly tighter inside line. It makes it a little bit easier for Rosie to defend heading into the Graham Hill bend in just a moment's time here. And there's actually contact between these two cars as we exit out of the Graham Hill bend, meaning Rosie's just a slight bit slower as we head into Surtees now. Hugging the inside line as she just goes out a little bit wide on exit here. That has actually allowed, I thought, it allowed us to carry a bit more speed, but it's allowed Barry Clayton actually to get along side by side as we head down the Pilgrim's drop down. We know Barry Clayton has a good car in a straight line. We're not too sure what Rosie's is looking like, but as we head now through the Hawthorne bend, where it all went wrong for Barry Clayton a few laps ago, we see that Rosie Oliver still running in P6 at this point in time. We're going to head now through the end of Sector 2. And although I say the end of Sector 2, Sector 3 is the dominant sector really here at Brands Hatch. We are entering Sector 3 at this point in time. Heading through onto clearways once again. Actually, the back end of Barry Clayton's car wanting to step out ever so slightly. I imagine the balance of his car is slightly off owing to the fact that he has no front wing, rather. So this is a mighty impressive drive for Barry Clayton, given the damage he is carrying. He's able to bring that challenge to his competitors still. And we're on to the start-finish straight once again with Rosie Oliver still leading these two as Barry Clayton has a brief look around the outside. Is way too far back to make anything stick, though. Rosie goes wide, though. She's gone very wide up through the paddock hill bend. That gives Barry Clayton the inside heading into Druids, who will be later on the brakes. It will be Rosie later on the brakes, defending that position, defending it well there. That was a nice staunch defence. That's what we like to see, as Barry Clayton actually goes a little bit wide there on the exit of Druids and has to drop back into P7. Heading down now then through the Cooper Straight, which follows you straight back into Surrey. Some great names here, of course, of some historic British racing figures. Naming convention for this circuit, very strong indeed. As we head now onto the Pilgrim Drop once again, it's going to be Rosie Oliver who still leads this battle. I hope this is one of those battles that just continues on to the end of the race, because it's absolutely exhilarating. As Jack Hodson, I believe, has had a bit of an issue. That's a big issue for Jack Hodson, running in P2 then. For a little while. We didn't quite see the overtake, unfortunately, so it's Will Inglis who now leads this race. That was perhaps a bit inevitable, but what wasn't inevitable was that big issue for Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson then into the barrier at the exit of Sterling's, that was, and now down into P3, potentially with Matt Daly for company. Now we'll have to see over the next lap, with that damage that Jack Hodson now has, and of course an old soft compound tyre, how his pace compares to Matt Daly, because Matt Daly might, with his medium compound tyre and relatively clean running this race, might be in with a chance of a podium here. So let's just wait and see. There we see the tyre marks in the distance with all of the battling that we've seen on the exit of Paddock Hill Bend as Barry Clayton then on the entry into Paddock Hill gets the move done under braking. Nice, strong, brave move there, as it's always brave if you get a move done into Paddock Hill. For Barry Clayton up into P6, but not to be outdone. Rosie Oliver on the entry into Druids takes the inside line there and takes back P6. We'll have to wait and see what these drivers can do in the final few minutes of this race. This promotes Alan Matthews, though, up into P2. A great race turnaround for him, as it turns out to be. And Will Inglis, of course, his fortunes completely flipped, really. 7 seconds now down to P2. He can just bring this car home comfortably and quietly without too much, really, in the form of a challenge. Matt Daly, meanwhile, isn't quite able, it seems, to bring that challenge to Jack Hodson just yet. We'll see how that plays out on the next lap, though. But how will this battle now play out between Rosie Oliver and Barry Clayton as we head now into the Sector 3 part of the lap? Rosie Oliver potentially running a little bit wide there, leaves the door open for Barry Clayton, I think, because she's just trying to make that Giulietta as wide as possible right in the centre of the track, providing him as little of opportunity to get a nice, safe and secure overtake done as we get back onto clearways once again. Barry Clayton will benefit from a very small slipstream effect. Of course, he has damaged aero, though. That certainly won't help matters. And through the Clark curve, once again, Rosie Oliver, so strong on the defence here. This has been a very impressive drive. One of the highlights, I think, of this race, really, is watching these two very, very vibrantly liveried cars battling it out as we head now down into the Paddock Hill Bend once again. This time Rosie is going to be strong on defending that inside line, though. Will she run wide? Just about avoids going into the gravel, but it's okay because Barry Clayton does the same thing. Has the inside for Druids this time around. Barry Clayton's going to try and hang it around the outside, but Rosie Oliver forces him to go wide, squeezes him as much as possible, and he actually goes off the track there. That is a very, very elbows out defence from Rosie Oliver there. As we head through the Graham Hill Bend once again, Barry Clayton carries a bit more speed and is straight back on her rear wing. And through 30s once again. We have the Pilgrims Drop to negotiate in just a moment's time. The fastest part of the lap, bar potentially Paddock Hill Bend. I think Paddock Hill and the Pilgrims Drop will be neck and neck, of course. Pilgrims Drop, you benefit substantially from that big change in elevation that will allow your car to feel like it's even more turbocharged, and of course it already is in these Giuliettas. As we head through the right-hander into Sector 3, once again, contact between the two cars. It was only very, very slight, though. That is absolutely nothing in the world of touring cars. In terms of times at the moment, we've got 2 minutes to go in this race. I can tell you that Matt Daly has not been able to push towards Jack Hodson. It's a 1:32 for Matt Daly, currently running in P4 as both cars slide out wide. Rosie Oliver, though, the back end gets away from her. She scrubs off a lot of speed as a result of that. We are now side by side heading down clearways. She seems to recover it well, though, as Barry Clayton had his own issues and still in P6 at this point in time. I get the feeling that Barry Clayton, yes, there he is a little bit stronger on this lap, though. They are side by side. In fact, Barry Clayton gets a nose out in front. Does he, though? They are neck and neck as we head into Paddock Hill Bend. This time, though, it's going to be Barry Clayton with the inside line. Cuts a bit of the grass, actually. Loses a bit of speed there. Rosie Oliver carries more speed, but has to go the long way around. Has the inside potentially for Druids, but is well defended there by Barry Clayton. This is some very, very brave racing indeed. I think any more, if the dial was turned up one more up to 11, really, I think we'll be off the track and in the barriers. This is some very close racing indeed. Just look at this, Barry Clayton just doing some lawn mowing. That's not at all the racing line there, Barry Clayton, but I don't care. It's great racing. As we see Barry Clayton now in the lead of these two, as we head down towards the Pilgrim Drop once again. Not long at all to go in this race, really, but I get the feeling that this battle will go on until the bitter end now. Both cars here running the soft compounder tyre and in the 132s at this point in time. Yeah, Matt Daly in the 132s as well, whereas Jack is in the 131. So while there is a definite pace drop-off with that soft compounder tyre, it's not enough to warrant moving to that medium compounder tyre, so it seems. So an unfortunately difficult race for Matt Daly here, but it will benefit Will Inglis and Alan Matthews immensely in the championship hopes as the back end of Rosie Oliver's car steps out into Sterling's. I'm not sure if it's something to do with the camber of the track there. It's something we've seen a few cars wanting to do. In fact, we saw Rosie's car doing it on the last lap. I think the tyres now really, really struggling for grip, and we're just seeing the setups on these cars promoting a bit of back end looseness. I think it's something, you know, that Alfa Romeos aren't too afraid of, especially if you're a Mito QV driver. It's certainly not the rarest of things to occur, and it's a bit of a trait as it looks to be at this track in car combination, at least for the WTCR Giulietta as well. So the drivers have been managing it well for quite some time. Unfortunately for Rosie, it was just too much to ask towards the end of the race, and she drops down to P7. But I was about to say Barry Clayton can breathe easy now, but just as we go on board with him, Barry Clayton has his own issues and is now facing the wrong direction at the Graham Hill bend. And now Rosie Oliver says, thank you very much, I'll take the position back and back into P6 as if nothing ever happened. So Rosie Oliver now in P6 as we head through Surtees once again. And it's now about a second now between those two cars. I suspect that we could have another bit of a battle forming up between these two, just not in the way that I would have expected. And here is, if there was ever evidence to support that the medium compounder tyre, not the ideal tyre, it's now Andrew Rammer, just about 0.6 of a second. Apologies, no, my maths is completely off. About 0.8 of a second. No, 1.3. There we go. Got my maths done in the end there. Andrew Rammer closing in on Matt Daly as we head up towards the Clark Curve. So it'll now be a bit of a race of attrition for Matt Daly, really. He just needs to make sure he can bring it home ahead of Andrew Rammer. Can you imagine P5? That'll be I'm sure, bitterly disappointing end to the race for him. We are on the final lap of the race now with Will Inglis. We'll jump on board with him in just a second. But this battle between Rosie Oliver and Barry Clayton, which has gone on for quite some time, is going to go on for just that little bit longer. I'm very thankful that Barry Clayton, you courteously, and it's completely on purpose, I'll say, had that spin off as well to make sure that this battle could continue on. As we head now into Paddock Hill Bend once again, I'm now very fearful that we're going to see some more spinning from these two cars because they weren't pushing really that much last time around. They're going to both be pushing even more, but this time the stakes are a little bit higher. It's the final lap of the race and the tyres are just that little bit more worn out. So let's see what they can do. Meanwhile, Matt Day will be doing everything that he can to keep Andrew Rammer at bay. Because now only 0.7 of a second between the two cars here. Rosie Oliver actually goes off track at the Graham Hill Bend and now concedes a position to Barry Clayton. Let's see if there's any changes between those two cars, but we're going to have to go on board with Will Inglis for just a moment's time to celebrate what has been a great turnaround in fortunes for him. In the end, as it turned out to be quite an easy second race for him. He just had to bring it home and brought it home well. He did. We're on the start-finish straight now. Flashes the headlights in celebration. Will Inglis takes the race 2 victory. Congratulations, Will, for a strong way to finish the weekend there. Alan Matthews not to be outdone. Good, strong second race to him as well. Then we have Jack Hodson just behind some lap traffic there. We Steve Knight coming home classified P9 as Jack Hodson rounds out the podium with another strong race weekend finish for him. It's been a good race weekend actually for Jack Hodson. Bit of a quiet race too, but still some good points on the board for him. And there, just about, we see Matt Daly come home with P4, Andrew Rammer P5. Another photo finish between a couple of drivers. A little bit more than race 1 perhaps, but a good end to the weekend for him as it turns out to be, although I'm sure he wanted a few more points. Then after a race-long battle, at least what felt like it, Barry Clayton and Rosie Oliver come home to take P6 and P7 respectively. A great battle between those two. It was thoroughly enjoyable and a bit of the highlight of the weekend for me, really, although there have been so many. It's been a great set of races so far. As we have Rob Whitney, unfortunately I think hampered a bit by the medium compound tyre as well, coming home P8. So it's nice to have a bit of a breather after what's been two very close races indeed. I'm looking to see if anyone has got any victory donuts in store for me. I think they're all well deserved given how much of an exciting race both races were, in fact. Andrew Roma brings his car to a stop here and dives straight back into the pits. We have an attempt at some victory drifts from Matt Daly. I love how he always tries this in the front-wheel drive car, but somehow it works. It's very impressive, as Willie Gliss does some victory rallycross, as Alan Matthews also does some victory rallycross. Oh, there we are, Will. He's just driving the wrong way. I'm sure the FIA, if they could see this, would be very happy indeed. Thank God we're not regulated by them. In fact, makes contact with an invisible wall instead. That's one way to finish the weekend, I suppose. What a drift from Matt. Oh, no, never mind. It's okay, Matt. No one saw that. Anyway, that was Alan Matthews weaves in celebration, and Willie Gliss finally brings his car into the pits. That rounds out what has been a brilliant... we can still see Matt Daly in the background there. That rounds out what has been a fantastic weekend's worth of racing. I hope you've watched. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating, and we'll see you next week for some single-seater action at the Qatar Lusail circuit. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.